I think we're live. We are. Hello, welcome, Michael Livesley.
Good evening, Flora. How are we? And solstice blessings to you.
Solstice blessings. I'm practicing my banners. I put a banner up tonight, which I've never done before, so
Oh, very
I'm
good,
very
very
proud
good.
of myself. Oh, Michael, musician, actor, half of Nice Things podcast, teacher, and fellow hippie and esoteric explorer.
Oh, well, that's a good build up. Thank you.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on was because you are a fellow Graham Hancock enthusiast.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Absolutely, yeah. He's a
because
wonderful guy.
he is. And I heard you mention him, I'm pretty sure it was on the Infinite Jigsaw podcast with
Right,
Danny. And I think that's where I first heard you mention
right.
him.
Okay.
And I've never heard anyone else mention him in a way that sounded like they'd read him.
Hmm. He's
So,
very popular up north. Is Graham?
is he really?
Well, I suppose in the circles I move in, which are ever decreasing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's
So, how did you discover him then? How did you come across him?
I suppose the first time I ever encountered him would have been that documentary about the age of the Sphinx, which is Robert Bauval and oh dear, how can I not? John Anthony West. Uh, John
Yes.
John Anthony West doing the Magical Egypt series. I don't know if you've seen that, but the BBC showed the age of the Sphinx back in the 90s, in which Dr. Robert Schoch proves, because he's a geologist, he proves that the erosion on the Sphinx can only have been caused by water. So, in which case, the Sphinx must have been exposed to heavy rainfall for a good few thousand years. And the last time there was water in that region of the world, waterfall in the Sahara, I think I'm right in saying it's the Sahara, it would place it at least at 15,000 years old. So within that, Graham Hancock is on it, Robert Bauval, John Anthony West. And it was kind of one of those things that it's sort of... it's one of those things that, this speaks to, axiomatic knowledge, really. And there are things that we know in our bones, really. There's a sort of, each human being contained within the DNA of each human being is effectively what biologists refer to as a race memory, isn't it? There's these things that, when a bird hatches, it doesn't need teaching how to fly. Well, it probably does. I don't know. But anyway, birds don't need teaching how to fly south. Stuff like that. There are certain things that
It's intrinsic.
yeah. And I think that when speaking personally, when I first saw the pyramids in my granddad's encyclopedia when I was a kid, it just felt like when you first saw Stonehenge, obviously pictures in my case, but when you first saw these ancient sites, there's something, at a sort of deep visceral level that twitches within you, and you kind of feel connected to them, and it's almost as if you've got some knowledge of them beforehand. And so when I saw that for the first time, it kind of chimed with me that all right, these guys are onto something, and it's something that, first of all, I kind of know, and secondly, it's something I'm very interested in. I've always been interested in history. We had a great history teacher, Mr. Gannon, who used to say to us, this third year junior school, I used to go digging up old bottles where I grew up, because I was surrounded by farmers' fields, and in those fields, every year when the farmer ploughed the field up, there'd been originally what they called midden dumps, Victorian, middens,
Yeah.
Victorian bins. And so every year when he ploughed his field, you'd kind of walk over those fields and you'd see all the glass and bits of pottery and metal and stuff glinting. And so I used to take these bottles into Mr. Gannon, who was a fellow, there must be a posh word for a bottle enthusiast, an old bottle enthusiast. And he was as well. And we used to talk about it. And he used to say, history isn't all, I remember his words, it's not all, oh, Lord Snooty did this and Lord Snooty did that. As a big Beano fan, I knew Lord Snooty was. History's about people. It's about artifact. It's about the proof of life, really. And so with ancient structures and particularly ancient knowledge and ancient writing, Mr. Gannon taught us all about ancient Sumer and Babylonia and things like that. And there was just some connection. I always felt some connection to that distant past. And I think there's that continuum of humanity that we all well, I know what I feel, and I presume that most people either deny that or they revel in it, and I revel in it. So that was the first time I knew who Graham Hancock was. And then Channel 4 did a series probably around about the turn of the millennium, Search for the Lost Civilizations with Graham Hancock.
I didn't see that. You've been down this rabbit hole for far longer than me.
It was always there. I mean, it's always been there in nature. It was like whenever I used to, read history books or anything like that, it always felt like it was confirmation as opposed to fresh knowledge. I've always had this feeling of being, old. I always felt old. I mean, that might be because I had a lot of responsibility heaped on my shoulders when I was, very young. But I've always felt this connection. I mean, I never, I never, because of circumstances of life, I never had to go to school formally as such. I mean, I did go, but I didn't like it very much. And because we were very poor, I used to get the piss ripped out of me or beaten up, or the teachers didn't like me because my mum weren't married and all this other stuff. And so when my mum took ill when I was a kid and there was no one to force me to go to school, I never went. And I'd just sit there, listening to me nan. And I had 2 books. I had the Collins Illustrated Dictionary. The Oxford Illustrated Dictionary. And my granddad, who died by then, he collected, you remember those part works that, you buy one a week for 5,000 weeks and you get a book?
Yes,
yeah, one of them. And he had, I've still got both books, Webster's Universal Encyclopedia, it was called. And it's this great big thick thing. It's about 12 inches thick, madam. And so I used to sit there and cross-reference both of those. And then when my nan wasn't snoozing in the chair, she'd tell me about her life. There's that old Hindu saying, isn't there, when an old person dies, it's like a library burning down.
Very much so. I mentioned that at work the other day.
Yeah.
That we need to sort of approach the older generation with that in mind, rather than what we do with them in this country, which is kind of try and shove them in a corner and forget about them.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, luckily I just come in at the tail end of that, the sort of the end of what would I suppose now be termed Victorian values. My nan was born in 1908. She was a very interesting woman. I was born in 1972. So she had her first child when she was 22 and her last child when she was 50. So, she'd lived, we'll say, 2 world wars, the flu pandemic, she'd lived through it all, so this is a very interesting person to listen to. It's a piece of living history that I had the privilege to have unfettered access to.
Yes. Well, you were, it's called an autodidact, isn't it? Is it autodidact? Someone that essentially gains knowledge, teaches themselves.
Probably, yeah, that sounds about right. I think there are many other words for what I am, but I'll take that one. Yeah.
It's autodidact, yeah. So you come at this esoteric, sort of interest in esotericism, was that even a word, through your love of history.
Love of history, but also brought up in a very, strong Roman Catholic tradition as well, So, we were always encouraged to believe fairy stories. We were taught the Bible very literally as such. Whereas I always knew, and even as a child, I used to sort of, argue with, not argue, but, this is what annoyed teachers with me, because we had no money. My mum weren't married. And so I was constantly asking questions. I wouldn't go in school for a year and then I'd turn up the day before an exam, read the book the night before and come first, for example. It'd piss them off.
That must have been really annoying.
Oh, yeah. It really
they hadn't given you their knowledge, you see. You found it yourself.
But I'd also question them, because I would have done a lot of reading at home, So I'd sort of because my granddad had a great book collection, aside from those 2 the corpus of the English language in the encyclopedia. So he had a great book collection, And so I had my own opinions on all of this stuff that was, literally thumped into us. And I always took a sort of, I always thought there was my granddad was very like that as well. He had a very metaphorical interpretation of the Bible, whereby it wasn't to be, it is to be read literally, obviously. But it's metaphorical, It's like every fairy story you're told. There's a moral to this story.
Yeah.
And there's a moral to all the stories in the Bible, for the most part, I would think, anyway.
So when did you? I mean, you were raised as Roman Catholic. Did you kind of gradually move away from that, or did you suddenly drop it and pick up an interest in like Eastern mysticism? Like, I mean, I know that you are interested in the sort of Indian Kali Yuga stuff, the same as I am. So how did you leave the Roman Catholic faith, if you like, or yeah?
Well, it expands, really, doesn't it? Because you sort of, for me, I was always, if you like, I've always felt connected to, what Jung called the collective consciousness. I've always felt that we are all connected. So that side of things, again, it's not like learning something new. It's just like confirmation, because we're so mnemonic. As soon as we've got a word for something, we get it. And so as soon as I learned the nomenclature of all of this, it was kind of like, right, that's articulating what I know anyway. And like I say, I think that humans fundamentally are born with this lexicon of understanding of all this inside of them. It's whether they feel connected to it or not. But so it was kind of like the Roman Catholicism, if you like, for someone who was born with this hunger for knowledge and this sort of deep questioning nature anyway, that was kind of like the amuse-bouche, if you like. That was sort of like what was available. That was what was there growing up to sort of devour and take apart and feast upon and think about. I remember being a kid, I'd have been about 4 or 5 or something like that, and being told, that we never die, we live forever, and I started getting really frightened, the idea that you never cease to exist. And I remember just thinking, I used to sort of think about that an awful lot. I still do occasionally. It's frightening. But so's death. So that was kind of like the first introduction into some form of metaphysical thought, really. And then it just expands out, really. So the history comes in and, you learn about the ancient Sumerian creation myth. You learn about the ancient Egyptian creation myth with Osiris and Set and Isis and Horus. You learn all these things. And then you sort of, you kind of start to draw lines, don't you, between things. And it's just like, oh, okay, so Dionysus was sort of born of a virgin on December 25th and all this other stuff. So you sort of then you start learning about Stonehenge and you start learning about the solstices. You hear these new words, so you go straight home and get the dictionary out and look what a solstice is, and you fathom out that for some reason these dates are very important to all religions. It's like the winter solstice, isn't it? From the naked eye's perspective, the sun doesn't move on the horizon, and then after 3 days it rises again. So it doesn't take a sort of degree in theology to suss out that, hang on, right, the sun dies on the cross of the horizon and then after 3 days it rises again. All right, I see. Okay. Like I say, this metaphorical interpretation of the Bible. So it didn't take too much to fathom that out, really.
So you have to be curious, don't you, though?
Yeah.
Information is out there for people, but people don't have that curiosity.
I'm cursed with it. Absolutely cursed with it. Yeah, it won't leave me alone.
Under curse. Yeah. Well, I was raised in a very atheist family, and for a long time I just thought the idea of this being the only life we had and no afterlife, I thought, thank God for that, because I don't want to do this all over again.
I've never entertained that as a possibility.
No, well, I did, and then things happened, and I changed my mind, and then I realized that actually this wasn't it at all. Various strange things happened, and that made me realize that this isn't it.
It will reach out to you. I mean, it will reach out to you, and it's that whole old Bill Hicks thing, isn't it? He sums it up so succinctly at the end of It's Just a Ride. That fantastic. It's such a shame, I'm sort of being consumed now with sorrow that we lost Bill Hicks at the age of 32, but how he sums it up at the end, a young man on drugs today realized that there is there is no life. Death is only an illusion, and we are all the imagination of ourselves. And so it's like So in Proverbs in the Bible, when God's saying to the guy, it's like, go and tell your people I am here. Who shall I tell them you are? What is your name? I am. That's what he tells him. Go and tell them I am. And that the clues are all in there. We are all God. We are all expressions of the God consciousness, and we're all connected in that way. So
do you believe we come back? Do you believe that our souls go out into the ether, if you like, that our essence?
Our souls do what?
Our souls. I knew you were going to pick up on that. Do you think that the souls of humans, the souls of people, because I feel that we've got this essence that is us, which is called the soul, isn't it? And that doesn't die. That carries on. That continues.
Yeah, I think the individual soul is something which isn't. I've thought about this a lot, about reincarnation. Yes and no. So I think that everything on the planet has got its consciousness of varying levels. I think everything's to a certain degree sentient, even Evertonians on this planet. And so, when you talk about reincarnation, well, what do you come back as? I mean, what how do we classify revivification? I mean, what is that? So do we come back and get another life cycle as a human being? Well, possibly not.
Well, you said you're an old soul. So if you're an old soul, and I do believe that some people are old souls. So
I think that whatever. So I think that for me, I think that there's the sort of the vehicle that we inhabit, and then there's the consciousness that we're connected to. And you say things like, when people talk to you and they mention stuff and they're pushing you for a decision. I think it's the best example I can get. So they're pushing you to make your mind up about something. It's like, well, hang on, I've got to go away. Let me think about this. And all right. So we say that, many times a week probably. But when you go away to think about it, who are you having that conversation with? Who are you discussing these options with? So you're going away, to converse with something. And so when I say that I feel like I'm an old soul, I feel like I'm connected to something that's old, whether that is actually me, or whether that is just something I've got the luxury of being able to connect to. I don't know. I mean, these are great questions that, we've sort of humans have chewed for as long as there's been humanity. And I don't have, I can discuss them, but I don't have any definitive answer because I'm still looking for it. At the moment, my mind leans towards the idea that we are all some form of individual expression of something greater. So which bit is reincarnated and which bit is sort of seasonal, if you like, I don't know.
So a bit like Shiva, all the different Hindu gods and goddesses are just manifestations of different aspects of his personality. Is something like that? Is that what you?
Well, certainly manifestations of something. Yeah. What that something is, we probably won't find out until this something ends. But it's kind of like, if you take a metaphorical interpretation of the Bible, for example, and it's also, I think I'm right in saying it's Padmasambhava who says, the old man will die and the new man will find to his inexpressible joy that he never really existed at all. So the idea that there's a you before you realize you're part of something bigger, and there's a you afterwards. When you realize, like when Jesus realizes, what he is, and then he comes back to life. It's kind of like, the metaphor for that is that there's an old you that's doing all the things to be wrong, and there's a new you that is a completely different person. I mean, we are many different people during our lives. I mean, we are reincarnated during our own lifetimes.
Well, even just in one day, it can be a different personality in one day.
In the past 5 minutes.
Yes. So, what have you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Egyptian Book of the Dead?
The Tibetan one, yeah.
Yeah, I just find that fascinating, where they sort of say that the soul is reincarnated. Is it day 47, day 45, day 47.
It's something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and then sometimes you can get to choose the next family that you can be part of, or the next body that you. Well, I guess this links to how they choose the next Dalai Lama, isn't it?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, because I mean, there's a book called Jesus the Man that I read many years ago, and in that he sort of says that the reason why Jesus disappears in the Bible when he's about, I can't remember what he is, I think about 5, and comes back when he's 20 odd. I don't. Yeah, is that he was away being the Dalai Lama. So that's kind of what that book says. And the three wise men. I've seen film. I remember seeing film years ago of when the Lama dies, and then the 3 monks come out of the Lama Tidge or wherever he lives, and they come out of there, and they have a little tray each, and in there will be, say, his cup. And so there'll be a tray with a lot of cups on it, one of which was the one owned by the recently deceased Dalai Lama, and then there'll be another guy. So it was kind of drawing parallels with those being the 3 wise men, and the young child, the newborn choosing, and the one who picks, as you say, day 45, whatever it is, the one who picks all the items that belong to the guy who's just died, that's the reincarnation. And then the parents are invited when the child's 5 years old or whatever, he can come and become this, or he doesn't have to, but when he's of that age, he can make his own mind up. So that's what he was saying in that book.
See, I think that they, the they that we quite often refer to these days, these people who are trying to control everything, that they are from this long line, this long dynastic line that goes all the way back.
Well, I mean,
think
there's certainly in the legend of the jinn, isn't there? Within Islam, there's the jinn who are kind of like where we get the genie from.
Yeah.
And they're sort of malevolent spirits as such that inhabit. I think they inhabit people, or they are malevolent people. I'm not entirely certain, but I'm I think I've seen people become inhabited by the spirits of malevolence, whatever you want to call it. If there's one thing for sure over the last couple of years, we know evil exists.
Yes, definitely. I think this last 2 years has really made people who were sitting on the fence spiritually sort of find a path.
Yeah, well, it's the old Gnostic thing, isn't it? Light and darkness, or the Taoist thing of order and chaos. It's you can't have one without the other. Yeah. You just can't. And that's the thing with Gnosticism, isn't it? Because there's Lucifer's the bringer of light. People often conflate Lucifer and Satan these days, don't they? As if it's the same thing. Whereas Lucifer's kind of more, you will do anything in order to benefit yourself.
Wasn't he like the fallen angels? Was he a fallen angel?
But he's not Satan. Lucifer and Satan.
No.
Yeah. So there are a lot of Luciferians who are sort of, incorrectly cast as Satanists. So Luciferian is kind of, it's still bringing light, but it's bringing light to yourself as opposed to light to the world.
I do believe in malevolent spirits. Have you seen that James Delingpole podcast with? Is it He's a psychologist, Marzinski. Is it Jeff Marzinski?
Is this the guy who did the research with the schizophrenics?
That's right, yes. Well, for a few years, it suddenly occurred to me, I was thinking schizophrenics and they hear all these voices, and I suddenly thought, what if those voices are actually real and they're not in their heads? So what if, perhaps they are real? And then when I heard that podcast, I just thought, God, that sounds quite interesting and possibly like it could be true, because I was at the moment at that time I was just getting into learning about archons and the Gnostics and what they thought about malevolent spirits and darkness. So I think that definitely exists.
Yeah,
and can possess with it. I think the theory is that it can possess people who are feeling or going through a period of anger or darkness themselves, and then they feed off that.
Oh, aye. Yeah. Well, people could, there's sort of conscious and unconscious decisions we make all the time.
Oh,
You know, I can't remember who said it. Something along the lines of every time we tell a lie, you know, a demon is born or something like that.
that's
Um,
scary. That would make anyone stop telling lies, wouldn't it? I think.
well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? When you're attempting to sort of muck around with the metaphysical substructure of reality by,
Yeah.
you know, trying to bend it to your own ends, it never turns out well.
No.
It never turns out well. So every time we make those choices, we are effectively, you know, creating more chaos in the world.
I'm definitely more careful about the energy that I put out. I mean, I've always believed in energy, and I've always believed that if you give out positive energy, then that does go out. I mean, I know all of this sounds crazy to people that aren't on the same page, but I always say to people, you know, think about, you know, the old-fashioned radios when you go to turn the dial and it would buzz and crackle as your hand got closer. And you know, we do give out energy. And so I
Yeah, yeah,
became
yeah.
a lot more careful. And then I became even more careful when I learned about archons and how they can possess you if you're going
Yeah.
through sort of, and it's made me a lot more, I think having some kind of spiritual path or some kind of religion, I don't really like the word religion, I think it does really make you a better person.
Well, I mean, Nietzsche was the first to fathom out, wasn't it, that in the absence of Christianity, Europe would descend into totalitarianism. You know, it's kind of,
Yeah,
it's often that quote's clipped, isn't it? God is dead. And it's not
yeah.
quite what he said, but he was sort of predicting the rise of fascism and the rise of
Whereas God is
communism.
dead and we killed him, isn't it? I think.
That's it. That's it. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
But he realized that without some kind of dogmatic underpinning,
Mm.
people would attempt to create their own rules.
Well, here we
Um,
are. Here we are.
yeah, yeah. And there's something about, you know, Ten Commandments, whatever you want to call it. There's something that is in there. Again, it's kind of, you know, here's some clues, guys, if you don't want to end up in bloody misery and chaos, you
Mm.
know, here's some tips. It's up to you if you take them or not. You know, you exercise free will, but here are some tips for you to attempt at least to keep chaos out of your life.
We're in a bit of an anything goes period, aren't we? Well, we're in the Kali Yuga, aren't we?
Well, we are, but there's only another 25,000 years of it to go.
Oh
So
God, I
you
was
know,
going to ask you how long it lasts for.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
I
keep
mean,
hearing this idea that we're coming out of it now into the next golden age, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's not going to be while I'm alive, though.
well, I mean, this speaks to the question of perception, really, doesn't it? You know, because you know your subconscious is what feeds on things without you even knowing. So you know the signals that it receives, it processes into your perception, and then your perception shapes your behavior, and your behavior shapes the world. So you know there are. I think I'm right in saying. Let me think. I think there are three Viennese schools of psychotherapy. Yeah, there's Freud with his will to pleasure. There's Adler with his will to power, and there's Frankl with his will to meaning. So in Viktor Frankl's book Man's Search for Meaning, which is an amazing book. If you've never read it, go and read it. You know, Viktor Frankl was a survivor of the concentration camps in obviously in World War II, and the book he wrote is just, you know, the way that he found meaning in that. Absolutely, you know, the stuff he describes in there is just wow. How you got through this with your spirit so intact, it's incredible.
I've heard
It's
about that book before. I
incredible book.
haven't read it, but I did read quite a few when I was still at school. Actually, I read quite a few books about the Holocaust, like Holocaust survivors. I read a few odd things when I was a teenager. It's not the sort of
Yeah.
thing I think a
Well,
teenager would read, but
Viktor Frankl's book is, you know, so his whole approach became then about, you know, it's the will to meaning that is the essence of being a human. You must find meaning, and you either find that in a great project, be that artistic or whatever it may be,
yeah,
or you find it in the love for someone else, or you find that simply within yourself. You know, so I mean, I think that over those three approaches, there's truth in all of them. You know, but I think that the path that we've gone down the last 100 years at least is that everything has got to be rooted in power.
and
And
materialism.
oh yeah, absolutely, Absolutely, materialism, and so these are the gears, aren't they? With which this is what we're forced to operate within, if you like. This is what shapes our perception, and if perceptions are controlled, and your behaviour is controlled, and then the world is shaped. And so when people, you see a lot, and that's why I don't do too much social media, when you see people all the time going on about how, oh, it's hopeless, oh, we're in chaos, oh, it's, I'm so depressed, it's never, it's over, and all this other stuff, it's like bullshit. It's
Absolutely.
absolute bullshit. You create the reality that you wish to live within, and then the idea is that we improve the world by making our little bubble of it good.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to do that doom thing because I mean, I don't mean now, but I mean, obviously, a few people went on Twitter, me included, initially, because I was thinking, oh God, I need to find some people. I need to prove I'm not completely mad. And now I think it's time to move on and do positive things. Just be the change, do the
You
things
must.
that are going
Yeah.
to make the world a better place. Because you said, it's no good carrying on whining and whinging about it. Park that and do something positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, there's a fair degree of whining and whinging, but there's also a sort of, the majority of it, and the biggest problem is that people are creating the very reality that they claim to be so, that they're whinging and whining about. It's like, hang on a minute, you are. You're the sort of the gears and the levers. You're in the engine house of this, driving this by disseminating this view of the world. And I
Negative
don't.
energy.
Yeah, you do get. As you say, you attract what you give off.
Yes, I definitely think. I mean, not always. There's the odd time, isn't there? I mean, you can sort of send out positive energy and you get negative energy back, but that's just the way of the world. But I think generally, if you give out positive energy,
Yeah,
that's what. And it's not even about you getting it back personally. It's about the world getting it back. Now I feel like I
absolutely.
feel.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Yeah. You've got to play your part. It's I think he was called Alfred North Livingston or Alfred North Kingston. I can't remember which. He was who they refer to as the grandfather of process physics. And he said a couple of things that stuck with me. So I think one of them, I'm right in saying, I'm a bit dodgy about this first one, but I think he said, dreams are where our thoughts go to die, or something like that, rather than us, our bad ideas, or something along those lines. But
Yeah,
the one that really sticks with me is that the world isn't made up of matter; it's made up of what matters. And so, process physics, the way he described it, is that we're all, as opposed to just people going about our daily lives, we're all processes banging into each other, and cause and effect and stuff like that.
like Brownian motion.
Yeah. Well, we all know what we're doing. We all know what we're doing when we tell even a small mistruth or something. We know when we're manipulating people to get what we want. And it's sort of taking your foot off the gas with that and just saying, you know what, I'm going to try and let reality play out rather than me constantly trying to be the director, the actor, the playwright, all those things.
Yeah,
So I think that you start to feel more content, and the Kierkegaard quote, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, and so that anxiety comes about because you're trying to control too much. You're trying to control people, even by the littlest thing, because we're so clever that we're lucky enough to inhabit the most amazing vehicle that's ever been designed, in the human being. And that's something that we've seen, especially in the last 50 years or so. People are the enemy, people are bad, people are killing the planet, people are this, people are that, to the point where, with the combination of that sort of dogma being broadcast from our academic betters, a combination of that and Hollywood and other art forms who sort of completely degrade and denigrate human life and existence. We're at the point now where we don't think human life has any value, and by logical extension our own has no value. And so that's a problem. That's a real problem,
that's a
because
worry as well, isn't it? Because in some respects, this whole idea that we're in this Kali Yuga, in some respects, I think things have to play out. But
Well, they
then
do.
we also have to intercept and steer things as well to a certain degree.
We do, but we also have to guard against manipulation. We need to ensure that we remain truthful. And we know what's right and we know what's wrong. And that can become very skewed when people are blinded either by ideology or dogma, as we all know. So it's very, very difficult to tread the fine line, you know,
Yeah.
to walk that tightrope between order and chaos, and to simply be a force for good. You know, because we are incredibly capable, intelligent beings that know within a few hours of meeting someone which are the sort of words. We subconsciously do it. We know how to manipulate people's behavior and plant seeds and you know, get them to make us a cup of tea in half an hour. You know what I mean? We're dead clever. We're really clever. And so underestimate humanity at your peril, really. And that comes in many shapes and sizes. And primarily, and I think the most virulent strain of that is to denigrate, degrade, and devalue humanity and human life. And I think we see that all the time. You know, we live in a sort of news cycle world whereby we're constantly creating enemies and angels and demons and stuff like that. And the way that things work now, especially with modern clickbait journalism, is it's a recipe for disaster. It's like you are, you know, all civilizations fall from within, you
Yeah.
know, and that's what we're seeing. Really, we're seeing people completely and utterly lose all value of their role as part of the continuum of humanity, really. And it's a real responsibility. It comes with real responsibility.
It's like people have been emptied out, like you said, of their humanity and filled up with all this materialistic stuff. I mean, literally stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people who are sort of very unhappy, and they don't find their happiness through shopping and buying things, but they think they do, and it's that short buzz. But
Yeah.
unless people are ready to, or unless they're ready to believe in something other than themselves and other than this life as just being it, it's not something that you can. I mean, people just think you're mad when you talk about this kind of stuff if they're
Oh,
not.
I talk to everyone about this kind of stuff. I don't care what they think. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I don't. But you know, they do think you're mad, though.
Oh yeah, of course they do. Well, I mean, let's be honest. It's kind of like it's not a bad assessment, really. I mean, you know, to be classed as sane in this world would be,
Oh god.
pretty interesting to say the least. But I mean, it doesn't alter in any way that connection we have with our ancient past, and that connection that we have with the planet, and the connection that we have with the God consciousness, because that is always there.
Yes.
You can't
So,
crush it.
so do you know? I mean, here's me asking. Of course, you know the Akashic Records. What do you think?
I don't think I know it.
Oh, really?
I don't think I do. Go on.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, the Akashic Records are basically like, well, you know, that now you can use your computer, your laptop, whatever, in the cloud.
Right.
Everything's in the cloud, isn't it?
Yes.
You can choose to save things in the cloud.
Yeah.
Well, the Akashic Records are like humanity's version of the cloud, where when you were saying earlier on about the Indian proverb or the Indian saying about when
Oh
an old
yes.
person dies, a library. What is it? When an old person dies, a library. Sorry,
Like a library burning
a
down.
library burning down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Akashic Records are apparently where all our knowledge over hundreds of thousands of years, and even before then probably, it's where all our consciousness and all our knowledge is stored in a version of the cloud, but it's the universal cloud, the universe,
Right.
or I guess what you might call the divine.
Mm.
And so when people, you know, when people have these children and they're like little geniuses and they don't know where it's come from.
Yes.
So the idea is that maybe they've downloaded something from the Akashic Records.
Okay.
Or I think music, the gift of music, and
that's a conversation.
Well, see, the way I write music, I write it in fits and starts, and I don't sit down and write a song because I just can't do it. And I'm absolutely convinced, because I don't know where they come from, and I don't think they come from me.
No, I mean, I got one about 2 months ago. I've recorded everything, lyrics, everything. It was in a dream, and it was a Paul McCartney song in the dream. And I thought, oh, that's a Paul McCartney song. It must be, but it wasn't. And so I woke up, sang it into my phone, scribbled the lyrics down, and went back to sleep because I just knew it'd go, you know. And so I got up the next day, but it wasn't just the song; it was the cello parts.
Yeah, it came to you fully formed, almost.
Everything, yeah, absolutely everything. You know, I recorded like about I think about 6 or 7 different audio files. You know, all the cellos, right? Okay, and all this business. You know, so I kind of recorded it all piecemeal, and then the next day I got up. And I was trying to play it on the piano. I was like, oh no, I can't quite get. And then I came up with the idea of, why don't I just export the audio file from my phone, drag that into my sequencer program, and play over the top of it, which is what I did. And so I fathomed the tune out by playing over what I'd sang into the phone at 3 a.m. or whatever it was. So where does that come from? I can only, like you say, I can only explain it as being tuned into some frequency. That's it. That's it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But I mean, they bug you, don't they? I mean, you know, music bugs you. It's sort of like, you know, you'll get an idea for a song. I get ideas pop back into my head from 20 years ago for songs I've never recorded. I'm like, shit, I must sing that into the phone. And then
isn't it funny how something stays with you for that long, though? It's like it's lodged in there.
Well, it's like it's a transmission that you only intermittently receive. You know, it's kind of like almost as if, right, I've tuned into that now, right, I've got that, okay. And, you know, if you're in the right place at the right time, you can record it or scribble it down or whatever it may be. And then you don't lose it, because that's the crap thing, isn't it? You lose it, and then 6 years later, you'll be doing summer in the garden, and bang, it's back. It's like, oh shit, I can't just drop everything now and go and record that, you know. But if you don't want to lose, and then there's that other sort of mentality I have with it, whereby it's like, do I ever want to, you know, this low resolution piece of music, this song, do I ever want to tune into it and sort of bring it into, you know, contact with other human beings? Or do I want to leave it just sort of ethereal and hanging and occasionally popping into my head? I'm not sure about that. And I must have made my mind up, because there must be about half a dozen songs that I occasionally hear, and then they leave again. And it's just like, and here's where my own personal sort of belief structure comes in. I just think that sometimes it's just like, you can have a bit of that, right? No, I'm taking it back now. I'm going to let you hear that again. No, I'm taking it back now. So with me, the writing process with me is generally, it's all it depends on the resolution of it. Sometimes it's a very low resolution, and sometimes I'll get the occasional sound rather than a word. But sometimes you get the whole word. Sometimes you get the sort of onomatopoeic outline of the word, and sometimes you just get the music itself, and then as soon as you play that, you get the next download, you get the next element.
Yes, it's like it comes naturally, follows on. Like, I know what you mean, like you'll get a little sort of like a little guitar riff or something in your head, and then you'll play that. That's what happens to me. I'll play that, and then I'll sing something over the top of that, and then the next line sort of happens automatically.
Yeah. If you keep pushing,
if
you keep pushing, it's like that morning I got up after hearing that Paul McCartney song in my head, you know, which is, you know, in the process now of becoming, you know, with the collaboration with others, is now about to live, you know, and be released. Well, in about 2 months, but it's almost as if, you know, you get. Once you get started, once you push through that can't be asked, this is never going to work. Nah, it's shit. It's just sounded good in my head. You push beyond that and get the first bit down, then it's almost as if you've done the donkey work and it's a flood and you can't keep up with it. I don't know if you write. Do you write as well? Just like write, like prose or whatever.
I don't sit down and say I'm going to write a song, because I can't do it like that.
Oh no, I've never done that.
I get a riff or a sentence.
But do you write?
So yeah, I do write. Yes.
So you know what that's like as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a grind, and then it's like cycling up a hill, innit?
I
And
don't
then you
find
get.
that.
Do you not? I find
No.
sometimes. Well, it depends, but generally, I find the grind in it, and then once you've started chipping away at the block, you can't stop. You can then see it fully formed, and you have to sort of finish it.
See, I just if I find that I'm struggling, or if I've come to a full stop, I just park it, and
Oh
then
no, I find that at the start. I find it difficult to start because
oh
I
really?
know, yeah, because I
Oh.
know with me and the sort of, I know what I'm like, and after a sort of becoming someone who doesn't finish anything for decades, I
Oh,
became
I know
someone
how
who,
that is.
yeah, I became
I'm a great
somebody. Well,
starter.
it's like that Pink Floyd song, isn't it? I can't think. Half a page of scribbled lines is the line within time, isn't it? Plans that either come to naught or half a page of scribbled lines. And so I was that kind of person, and then I started, because I used to drink an awful lot, and then when I was drunk, I noticed I'd start going, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do the other, and I realized I was starting to feel physically sick. Every time I started to talk about things, I knew I had no intention of finishing. So
Oh,
that sort of physical manifestation of what I'd become effectively in my own psychological perception of myself, that led me to become a finisher. And so it's the start that I feel reluctant with, because I know that if I start something, I will not move from the same spot until it is absolutely, in my mind, perfect. And that can be,
that's a good thing, though, is it? Is that
oh
is that
yeah, I think it is.
yeah?
Yeah.
What made you? What was the catalyst for you suddenly changing your life around?
I'm not sure. I mean, I would say that it was me mum dying if it were true, but it's not true. It's absolutely not true. I carried on bumbling along the same as I was for many years after my mum died. I mean, immediately when my mum died, so there was that pressure. I'm resourceful, but I'm lazy. So immediately when my mum died, it was kind of like she died at 4 a.m, whatever it was. And because I am how I am, immediately I think I've got to then go and ring the estate agent, whatever they are, to tell them, my mum's dead. She was your tenant. I'm in her house. Therefore, my mum's died. I wish to continue the tenancy. Now, most people wouldn't be ringing up the estate agents at 9 a.m. to inform them of that, but that's just the way my brain works. I need a solid foundation. I need security. So I rang them up. Anyway, by 4 p.m. that afternoon, they'd rang me back and said, "Oh, we've spoken to the landlord, who says so long as you've got another £1,000 deposit, you can stay in the house." I had no money, I had no, and I had no money. So I was like, "Oh, okay." So immediately it's like, right. So put it this way. Within within a couple of days of that, I'd been to see a solicitor, I'd been to see a doctor to get myself signed onto the sick for being mental, because that's the trouble, you see, because for carers, when the caree dies, there's a massive hole in the system, right? I was applying for jobs, and it's like, I'd produced a rudimentary CV. I'd been a carer for 5 years, and so when they looked at my CV, it was like, "Oh, is this date right? You didn't work, the last time you worked was 5 years ago." I was like, "Yeah, I've been a carer." And they were obviously not going to pull a face and say, "Oh, anything about that." They'd look sympathetic, but you never heard back from them, because there's the old saying, isn't there? If you want to get a job, you need to have a job. So I couldn't get any work. So it was like, right, I'm going to go and see the doctor. I'm going to get on, because I was no longer getting attendance allowance, whatever you want to call it. So I can't get a job. I don't want to sign on at the dole, because I knew that if I signed on, I would lose the house. Because as the welfare advice guy said to me, he said, "I've never, ever seen anyone in your position manage to keep hold of the house." And it was kind of like, I'll be honest with you, with me, I just simply didn't want to go and dismantle my mother's life straight away. I didn't want to go in a bedroom and pack all her clothes into bin bags, or, whatever it may be. I just wanted to avoid her room for as long as I could. So, I didn't want to move. I still had a dog and all this other stuff. And I was I've always been a homebody. So I don't like change too much. Anyway, There's a point to this story. I don't know what it is. Oh, okay. So I managed
What was the catalyst for you?
Yeah. So I managed to keep that situation intact. And then there was my mate told me about IT training. This is year 2000. They told me about IT training they were doing. And I was like, oh, okay. I got a computer to keep myself sane when my mum was alive. So I've got a computer, right? I could do that. I could do that. So there was this Microsoft certified training course that cost $2,000. I got a career development loan they were doing at the time for that. So I did a 2-year course in 6 weeks. And then I applied for a job as an IT trainer, and then I got that. So from being in this sort of squalid position, I managed to get this job that was a little over $15,000 a year, which was decent money back then for someone in my position.
That's amazing. That's a very quick turnaround.
Well, within 8 weeks, I was an IT manager.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
So where did your music start? When did you?
That's always been there. I mean, I've always had tunes going around my head. I was always making up songs about the teachers. I was always doing impressions of the teachers, or I'd be singing to the dog about the dog, or whatever it may be, So I was always that, as my mum used to say, you literally make a song and dance about everything.
See, this is why I think this is a download, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I've no idea who my dad was, so I can't tell you if any of this is an aspect of him. I've no idea, but it's certainly nothing. It's very incongruous to the world I'm from. Very incongruous.
So is it like, do you feel like a bit of a fish out of water? Well, you probably don't, because you seem to fit in where you are perfectly.
I've sort of always fit in with myself, if you know what I mean. I've never been I've never been someone who has 30 friends. I've never been somebody who has been in any clique. I've never been somebody who's been sort of part of a gang. I've never been any of those things. I'm an only child who didn't go to school, and sort of, as the old saying goes, I grew like a weed, really. So I sort of...
Weeds are very strong.
Well, they are. But I mean, it took me a long time to realize that some of the things like belching so loud you could hear it in 3 counties is not something that, I was very proud of it, and still am. But you'd be out in a pub with people and you do that, and there'd be a look of shock on some people's faces. And
I'm laughing so much because my grandma used to do that.
Right, okay. She sounds great. But some people would be like, absolutely, because you're breaking a societal norm. And that makes people immediately a little bit scared of you. So if you're not completely aware, it took me a long time to suss out how to at least pass myself off as a member. Yeah, as a normal, whatever that means.
Whatever that is, yeah.
Yeah. So it took me a long time.
And now here you are, Michael, and the world's gone crazy.
Yeah, they've caught up.
You've just figured out how to be a normal person.
Well, that's why I have, I suppose. Maybe that's why I got my shit together, because the whole world had lost theirs. I mean, so it certainly wasn't that. But I first I had to be very responsible. There was no way I was going to do, because my granddad, who was a very staunch socialist, he lived in a council house for 50 years that he could have paid for 3-4 times over. But he believed in social housing, so that was never he's never gonna be something he did. And as soon as I could. So I had to work for 6 months before the bank would give me a mortgage. And then as soon as I could get a mortgage, I got a house. And then as soon as I'd earned enough money to pay that house off, which took me 7 years, I chucked in the IT manager's job, and I had the boss who was like, the amount of money I was on was staggering, really. And he said, Mike, you've got a job for life here. What are you doing? And as soon as he said that, I was frightened. Yeah. I was like, I don't want a job for life. So instead, I packed in this sort of job, by this time I'd grown my hair very long again, because they'd already let me in. They were stuck with me then. So I packed the job in to sit at home with my mum's dog all day before she died, because I liked the dog and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with the dog before the dog passed away. And I just packed the job in to sit at home all day with the dog and get stoned. Really, it's not really a great plan at 34. But that's what I did. Sorry?
Maybe you felt like you needed a rest.
I did, but I hadn't earned it, and you know, it was a really bad move. That it was a really bad move. But I had an idea. I wanted to devote myself to performing full time, and so 34. That took me that took me 5 years to figure that out. That took me 5 years to start making a mark um, within industry as
Yeah.
such. Um, so that's kind of, and then even then I didn't get my shit together. You know what I mean?
But you were
So
still successful.
I could have been a lot more successful, but I achieved and you know, hopefully once things get back on, I get back to doing what I do after COVID, because you know I got offered a wonderful job that I absolutely love, teaching drama. So hopefully once I get the performing back up and running, now that I've kind of, I wanted to be as good as I want to be as good as I can in the job, because I think there's a great responsibility when you're a tutor. I think there's a massive responsibility in terms of, you know, the future of the students is it's not entirely in your hands. Obviously, there's got to be effort on the part of the student, but I
But you've
feel the
got wisdom and
responsibility.
knowledge, haven't you, and experience to
I
also.
like to think so. I like to think so. And so I want to excel at this for now. That's what I feel like doing. Um, to do my very best at it. So again, this comes back to, I'd say around about 10 years ago, something clicked within me, and I wanted to integrate myself within society, where I was quite happy to exist outside of it for a
Mm.
long, long time. But I realized that we're social creatures, and I realized that uh, my sort of my life was dwindling down. You know, like I say, sitting in the house getting stoned with the dog isn't really a great strategy for success in life. And
And not a
again,
good use of your human body to learn and
precisely,
explore, yeah, and all of that.
precisely that.
Yeah.
You know the origin of the word sin. You know,
Oh,
it,
you tweet something about this the other day.
yeah, and
Yes,
it's an old Greek term, which is still an archery term, which means to
that's
miss
it.
your mark. You know, and so I was missing my mark, and you know, when I first heard that, I used to think that to miss your mark just meant, you know, you let the arrow fly and you miss. But
Yeah,
what if, you know, what if you never pick up your bow? What if you leave the arrow in your quill? You know,
yeah,
what if you never even try?
yeah.
And so I started to feel, I realized I was 39 years old. I realized that my social circle had dwindled to me and the dog. I realized that, you know, I started to feel, you know, time breathing down my neck. I also knew that, you know, my mum died at 47, so that was on the horizon.
So that was
Um,
in your subconscious somewhere, then,
yeah,
wasn't it?
hugely.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So there were all those factors that made me finally admit that
Get
I
your shit
actually
together.
get my shit together, and to finally admit that, you know, getting drunk wasn't really any substitute for taking your place in the human race, really.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think some of us have been. I mean, I spent 6 years partying in when I lived in Oxford, and I look back now and think I couldn't possibly have just spent 6 years not doing anything but getting
Oh, you'd be
party.
surprised. You'd
But
be surprised.
but I did, and actually, it did me the world of good.
It did for me. It worked until it stopped working, as the saying
Yes,
goes.
exactly. Yeah, it's like
Uh,
medicine, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and I don't regret. I don't really do regret. So I'm not that guy, you know. But I kind of, I could have done so much more, but nah, I never did. Um, and that's an end to it, really. I've sort of, one of the things that I've sort of been getting very into recently is, have you heard of Neville Goddard?
Oh, why does that sound familiar? I don't know. I couldn't tell you anything about him, but
So
the name.
Neville Goddard's very interesting, and he died in 1972. And but the wealth of his speeches that are on YouTube is astounding, absolutely astounding. So his whole thing is the law of assumption. So you actually live in the dream fulfilled, as he puts it. you don't say I'm going to be thin or I'm going to be, a famous rock star, but you live in, you are.
Yeah,
And
I
then
am.
yes, I am. There we go. We're back to, Proverbs in the Bible. I am. And so his whole thing is that you just change the tense. I am instead of I will be. And then his whole thing is that you feed your subconscious mind these signals. And then, as he calls it, you cross the bridge of incidents until your imagination hardens into reality.
Yeah, I can see how it's kind of programming your brain, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
using NLP on yourself, I suppose.
Yeah. And it absolutely works.
Yeah, I can imagine it
It
would.
really works because it's kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? You sort of you're willing to put the effort in if you already think that you are that thing.
Yeah, and I think you would obviously carry yourself differently as
Yeah.
well.
Oh,
You were saying.
100%.
Yeah,
Changes your outlook and mentality so much.
yeah. So have you had any, going back to the esoteric and the divine and how it all links to how we are as humans and what we do, have you had any really profound experiences that have sort of made everything
Yeah.
down?
Yeah. Lots and lots of God moments, as
Oh,
I
have
call
you?
them.
Well, tell us
Oh,
some God.
yeah. So, I mean, there were a lot of funny things happened after my mum died. Lots of funny things, things disappearing and then turning up in other places. And when I bought my house, which would be about, it was 2 years and 3 days after she died, when I got my house, and I was in there, and I was sat in the front room with the dog, well, lay on the sofa watching the telly, and I heard this massive clatter in the back kitchen. We say back kitchen up north, by the way. I heard this massive clatter in the back kitchen. I went in there, and all the bowls and plates and cutlery, 'cause I just moved into this house, that were just stacked on the worktop were all just flung across the floor, and it was just like, oh, all right. And now I would have thought, me being me, that would have frightened me. But I just thought, all right, okay, it's either the energy in this house or it's me mum, because when the dead are disembodied, how do they communicate?
Yeah.
And so then the next thing, I was coming home from work, and I was getting pissed off with myself because in the back room, I was coming home every day and I'd left the bloody light on, because it was winter. And so it was like, right, okay. And I'd come home the next day, the fucking light was on again. And it got to the point where I would stand in the back room before going to work and I would be like, I am switching the light off now and I am going to work. And then I'd come home and the light was on.
Wow.
So there were things like that, a lot of incidents like that, lots and lots and lots of little things like that. Stuff would turn up. Like, I used to smoke weed, right? So you know how you'd get the clipper lighter and you get the little pointy thing and shove it in the end to make a joint. And so I was looking around everywhere for this bloody little pointy thing to make this joint one night. Couldn't find it anywhere. Looked all over the living room. I was like, bollocks. So I snapped the end off a joss stick and used that, as you do. So I did that. And then I was going to bed that night. And I went to bed and I got in bed. And then by the bed, there was a guitar lead, believe it or not, because I buy nice leads now, but back then I would chop up leads and sellotape the ends together because I didn't have the right. Yeah, that's it. And by the bed was the end off a guitar lead with the prodder just shoved in it, and it was like, oh, all right, okay, where did that come from? Now people just say, oh, you were stoned, Michael. Well, that is true. But at the same time, it's just like, there's no way I would have done that. I'm a lazy bastard. And so if I think something's going to be handy, I tend to pocket it. I'm a renowned lighter thief, So there were lots and lots of little things like that. And lots of things where you'd open a book and there'd be something there, or, and we all have that all the time. Oh, I've never heard that word before. You open a newspaper. Oh, there's that word.
Yeah.
Synchronicity is definitely a concept that we all experience all the time. So, this law of assumption thing, the fact that everything is connected, and it is connected, and we are all connected. And, and so, in the words of the song, there are no coincidences, but sometimes the pattern is more obvious.
I think there are various. I don't know. I think there are sort of almost stepping stones. When you reach a point in your life and you look back and you can see all of those stepping stones. You couldn't see
Yeah.
them at the time, but you can
No.
see the path that you were on
Yeah.
just behind you.
Yeah. I mean, that's it. There ain't no map, is there? And that's the thing, and that's sometimes infuriatingly frustrating, and sometimes it makes you, so depressed and so anxious life. But you've got to trust in the fact that it's all going to work out. I mean, and so that's why, living in the dream fulfilled, the wish fulfilled, whatever you want to call it, can help you get through those moments and make that Kierkegaardian leap of faith, really, in order to put in the hours that ensure you cross that bridge of incidents in order to reach that dream.
So, do you think that we've got? Do you think we've all got a path? This is where I go back to the
I
Egyptians
think
and
we've
the
all
dead.
got numerous paths.
And do you think that I was obviously well, the reason we're here, I think the reason we're here is we are supposed to learn. It goes back to the Egyptian Book of the Dead, where you're there and they do the weighing of the heart, and also the questioning. What did you do? This is what Graham Hancock says, isn't it? What do you do? What did you do with that body? What did you do with that life? Did you waste it? Did you use it? So I think we've got a path that we're given, or maybe multiple paths, as you said, but it's then up to us to make those moves.
Well, free will is definitely something that we have, I believe. I don't think it's an illusion. I do believe we have free will. I do believe that we're all processes colliding with each other. And I do think that when we stray from that path and do things which transgress our moral code, or whatever you want to call it, we pay for it. And I think that whatever that thing is, that thing we go away, I've got to think about it when you go away to converse, whatever that is, makes you bloody suffer if you don't do what you know to be right. And it can be lovely in the moment, and you can enjoy it in the moment, and you can be like, oh, this is fantastic, whatever it is I'm doing. But if at the root of you obtaining that pleasure is some deception, now some people can lie and it doesn't bother them, right, at all. Or some people can swindle and it doesn't bother them at all. So that's all right, good luck to you. Other people can't get away with it. And they might be able to get away with it in terms of never being found out, but they don't.
Eat away at them.
Yeah. It's like that. The ancient Egyptians believed when you died, there was a pair of scales, and your heart went on to one, and a feather went on the other.
Yeah,
and they had to balance. Otherwise,
I think about that so much. If I do the tiniest thing wrong, I'm thinking, oh, what's going to happen to my heart when I get to the.
So what's doing that? Who's that?
Yes,
What's that? Well, there we have proof of the divine.
It does make you behave, though.
It does make you behave, and some of us, and when we talk about this old, when I talk about this old soul, this old spirit I'm connected to, that is potentially somebody who made a complete and utter balls of their life, and is there as some form of psychic mentor or something, and it's just like, I'm going to make you pay. I'm going to make you pay until you do what you know is right. And doing what you know is right, i.e., it's like in Genesis, first there was the Word, and the Word was God. Our words matter. Our words carry weight. Our words. Yeah, and words are the very metaphysical substructure of reality. The universe is made up of what matters, not matter. And so all those processes, when we articulate thought, they are spells, and they do matter, and they can either build heaven or hell on earth.
And when you think about just some words and how it can make your words can either make someone's day or make them happy, or your words can crush them. I mean, what is that if it's not a curse or a spell?
Well, that's why those who seek to control us, the first thing they go for is language. I mean, in 1984, there's that great speech O'Brien gives, whereby we've condensed the language down in order to stop people articulating thought. Because if you think about it, your imagination is very much based upon the breadth of your vocabulary. So the example that O'Brien gives in that is love and hate. Now, between love and hate, there are an awful lot of different grades. You know, there's fondness, there's dislike, you know, there's all those sort of little steps along the way. There's not just love and hate. It isn't binary, you know.
But it's become binary in this life now, hasn't it? They've reduced it down to
They reduce it to love and hate, yeah, because we're in Disneyland now, and everybody's either a good guy or a bad guy. But in 1984, he says we've gone further and we've removed love and hate, and then we had like and unlike, so that there wasn't a negative spin on the word. So if you reduce people's thought processes down to the binary and you restrict their access to you know, a richer vocabulary, then it does restrict the way they think. I think it's a tragedy that there are minds out there that are flabby and denied, you know, the workout that investigation and exploration gives to people.
Well, I think so many people don't read now, and I think that's the problem. They get
you know,
all their entertainment from the screen. Don't
great article on the internet. I can't think where it's from. It's from New Scientist or something. It's about 15 years ago, and it's called "Is the Internet Rewiring Our Brain?" And so in that, it describes how our hippocampus is shrinking, because if we don't retain knowledge, it's like, you know, who was Henry VIII, right? Some shit question like that, right? Or you know, when did Elizabeth I ascend the throne, right? 1558. Every schoolboy knows that. So you want to know what that is. So immediately, every time someone asks you that question, you look at your phone and Google it. 1558. So if you're using your device as an ancillary repository of knowledge, then why? You know, it's no surprise that the hippocampus is shrinking in people's brains. The sat-nav is doing that now.
Can psychedelics expand the hippocampus?
Well, I don't know in neurological terms what psychedelics do. But I certainly know that psychedelics changed me. 100%,
oh, me too. Yeah.
100%. You know, and it's interesting. I'm getting more and more. I've not done any, you know, drugs in a long time, but I'm getting more and more curious about DMT, because people are going to the same place, seeing the same things. There are people coming back from DMT trips, passing on messages. Oh yeah, there's a great video on the internet, a guy who says this purple girl who he always meets went on his DMT trips, and then a friend, he's never mentioned it to anyone, and then a friend does DMT and he says, oh, by the way, the purple girl said hi.
Oh my God!
And he's absolutely
goosebumpy.
Yeah. Well, it's a great video, and it's sort of like, so where are we going? And then that again, you come back to this 5 sense 3D reality, because this is just a vibration. This is just a frequency that
completely,
this consciousness is inhabiting.
Yeah.
So with psychedelics,
sorry, carry on.
no, please, go on.
No, I was going to say, years ago when I did, you know, when you just get these flashes of insight, and I'd done some LSD the night before, and I was just walking down the road, and I was just looking at the leaves, and all of the on the leaves was just really shining out, and I suddenly thought, actually, that the reality that we think we live in is not the reality. This is the reality.
That's right.
What we see when we are doing psychedelics, that's the reality.
Yes, because human beings view the world as icons, you know. So, for example, you know, the floor, a tree stump, a beanbag, a stool, they're all chairs. In our head, it's chair, right? Because it's Gibson's ecological view of perception. So we view the world as either tool or obstacle. So a car, if there's fuel in it and the engine will run, is a tool. It'll get you from A to B. You turn the key and it won't start. It's an obstacle. So we tend to view the world at an icon level. We just see the utility in objects, tool or obstacle. But when you take psychedelics, you start to see things at a sub-iconic level, and you do notice what color things are. For example, now without you know, if you say you went to the pub tonight, right, and you sat in the pub, and someone said to you, right, don't look round, keep looking at me, tell me what color the stool is you sat on. What? You don't notice the color of things. It's a chair. It's somewhere for me to sit down and have a pint, and that's how humans view things. So when you take psychedelics, you start getting more interested in the sort of subordinate levels of objects, the colors, the textures, and things like that. So psychedelics certainly help you view the world at a sub-iconic level. What that does to the brain, I remember reading somewhere years ago, because it was an old hippie who discovered it, who was probably a very young hippie at the time, that part of the brain, which pleased me to read, goes purple when you take LSD. And I
Oh,
thought, oh right, that's
purple haze.
interesting. I like purple when I've had a trip.
Yeah.
So it obviously it does something. It probably affects the flow of dopamine and serotonin. It probably, I mean, it's
I
only in the
think
last.
it connects things that aren't connected. It's what's the theory? As Graham Hancock says that it's in order to be able to steer through this life in this human body, we can't be turned on like that all the time. We have to kind of stay on this very simplified, almost like a video game level, where you were saying earlier on about the car being a tool or what's it, a tool or
an obstacle.
Or an obstacle. That's bringing it right down to almost gaming level, isn't it?
Yeah, and we are just, we are no different from the people who trod around 125,000 years ago. I mean, but that's an interesting concept in itself, isn't it? Because when you think about it, it's only at the end of the Younger Dryas period, the meltwater B incident at the end of the last ice age, it's only then that we lost all the megafauna. So, for hundreds of thousands of years, we were sharing our existence with bloody, 9-foot beavers and things.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this apex predator mentality that we have is very, very recent, and there was definitely, in my opinion, a civilization prior to this one, probably half a dozen, probably 50, probably 200 different. Who knows? If you think about the Ice Age, if you think about what effect that had upon the archaeological razor, when you think, literally, physically, and metaphorically, those big lumps of ice were like erasers going along the landscape.
Yeah.
So who knows? Yeah, who knows what they removed? They're finding things out all the time. The Denisovans. They've recently found another bone of a Denisovan, but the first one that they found in the caves in Siberia, in Denisovan, I think it's the body of a 9-year-old girl. It's bits and bobs of a skeleton of her. But the most remarkable thing that they found in this skeleton, that I think I'm right. You should Google this because I'm probably wrong, but I think the Denisovan is 30,000 years old. They've carbon dated, but she was wearing a bangle, and there's a little bead on that bangle, a tiny bead that has completely rewritten what they know of us, because it's got a machined hole right the way through it. That's been drilled with a fixed drill.
Yeah. So I think they knew how to do things that we've completely lost the skills.
Yeah, well, I've got a mate who's completely convinced that, and if you read the Bible, when they talk about the Watchers and stuff like that in the Old Testament, he's completely convinced that there were a race of giants, and that explains.
I think so. Yeah, and also they people used to live to be hundreds of years old as well.
Most definitely. I mean, there's such evidence. It's like even in Egypt, there's an entire wall that gives you the lineage of all the kings of Egypt, and it goes back like 30,000 years. It doesn't go back to 2,500 BC. It goes back thousands and thousands of years, and it's like
But we write that off as if that was just some kind of myth that they've written.
Yeah, well, it's like the Red Pyramid. If you look at that, it encases a much older structure that's completely battered by weather. And what they did was, when they encased it, they didn't face off the rock of this ancient building. They shaped the new limestone to fit perfectly around this weathered old structure.
Yeah.
So these pyramids that are about 5,000 years old were actually built on top, and to protect and preserve, I should imagine, much older sites.
Yeah.
That have got weathering consistent with like 30,000 years ago.
Why have we become this very? It's almost like we're a different race. I think that we are a completely different race of human from what there was, because we've become very. I don't know, egotistical and materialistic.
Oh
And
yeah. I mean, but that's because about 150 years ago, they learned how to tap into the basic need human beings have to figure in a dominance hierarchy. We all have that. We have to, and that's why I say about taking my place within society. It's you know, you're kind of lost without your status within a society, and so they tap into that and they realize, you know, you give people rank and status and nice stuff and nice things, and you make them, you give them real jeopardy. You don't give them enough. You don't give the rank and file enough to actually feel like they control everything, but you give them just enough power. It's the same way that the rank structure works within the armed forces. You give people just enough, and then you create a system of money, and it all falls apart if people stop believing in it. But I mean, it's like, you know, in the ancient world, I think I'm right in saying, you know, there's no evidence of large scale war in like the old records. It's only when we get to modern man that this idea of conquest and stuff comes in. And so,
that's to take more, to have more of everything.
yeah, which is a basic mammalian trait, isn't it? That we want to make sure we've got our bit and stuff everyone else. But I think that, you know, when you look at when they dig up old bodies and stuff like that, and they find people who were obviously quite severely disabled, and these are like bodies that are 20, 30,000 years old, and they exhume these bodies and they've made it into old age. Well, someone was feeding them and someone was caring for them. Yeah. And so it's a basic human characteristic to care for people who are weak. And I think that is something that is being lost. And it's getting more and more because we're becoming more and more polarized. Those people are evil because they say this. Those people are evil because they come from somewhere else. And you know, and it's not in the interests of people in power to have an equitable planet. It isn't in the interests of that, because if there was true equity across the whole planet, people would just be bipping around everywhere and no one would care, but people are trying to protect what's theirs all the time. So they've tapped right into that, you know, what they call the R complex within the brain, haven't they? They've tapped right into that fear center, and they keep people frightened all the time.
I think they enjoy playing with us. I think it's a mouse thing. I always think, you know, in Jason and the Argonauts, where you've got the gods and goddesses, and they're moving people around on the chess pieces, like chess pieces on the board.
What's that? As flies to wanton boys, are we? They swat us for wherever it is. Yeah.
The wings up. Yeah, I do think that we are a source of amusement to them.
We are.
They do wind us up and watch us go.
Absolutely.
If we poke them here, or if we take that away from them, or if we give them loads of that, how are they going to react to that? I think we are just playthings.
We are, and we don't appreciate the power that resides within us, and that's why, as utility for those in power, to completely and utterly degrade, denigrate, and attempt to destroy the human spirit and any form of value for humanity. And that's what we're seeing day in, day out. There's this onslaught against humanity. Oh, there are too many people. No, there fucking aren't. No, there aren't. You could fit every human being in the planet into Queensland or something like that, you know, or something like that. I remember this is man in the pub territory now, you know, giving you facts and figures that are completely wrong. But there's some there's some metric whereby you can fit everyone and give them like an acre each, and you could fit everyone in the planet into Australia or something like that. And it's kind of like, you know, and people who say there are too many people and we need to reduce the world population, it's like, right, well, you first, mate.
Yeah, exactly. You first.
You know, if we are, you know, such a scourge on this planet, then, you know, be my guest, mate. But me personally, I think too much of mankind, and I think that we are a divine species. And I think that if we could only tap into that consciousness and appreciate just what we are, you know, it's like that old saying, isn't it? Oh, you know, what am I going to do? What can I do? It's like, what do you mean? It's like, oh, you know, little old me. It's like, nah, mighty me, not little me. You
Well,
know,
how do we make people understand? It's right. It's 9 o'clock, 9:05. We've been going
is it
for
really?
1 hour and 25
Well,
minutes.
good Lord.
And not that I'm very happy to go on, but I know that you, as a teacher, tutor,
Yeah.
I know how exhausted you might be. So
Do another 10 minutes.
Entirely up to you.
Do another 10 minutes.
And let's focus on what can we do to sort of ignite the divine in people.
Right. That is a big question.
I know.
That is a big question.
I like to end on something positive.
Oh, there's bags to be positive about. I mean, the increase in spirituality people are feeling, because they have become aware that there is genuine malevolence within the world. Stop following people, based upon the sort of political persuasion. People who are fans of Boris or Keir or whoever it may be, they're all, as my nan used to say, they all piss in the same pot.
Well, you think people would have learnt by now, wouldn't you? But no, we're still in the sort of Conservative Labour ping pong, aren't we?
Yeah, they sort of repackage it, don't they? And they it's like, they reformulate, they change the recipe, they put a different wrapper on it, and people think it's all going to be different. Absolutely not. We're already in a, it's again, I think it's the third time I've quoted Kierkegaard, but it's one I like, and it's the most successful revolutions leave the buildings intact. So although we've got a 10 Downing Street, although we've got a BBC broadcasting house, although we've got all the edifice that we are familiar with and that we believe is set up to serve our best interests, all you've got, it's like, if you imagine it's like a film set, and the removal van is round the back taking all the stuff away. It's gone. All you've got now are the baubles and the ceremony, and it is very much, we're seeing the end of an age. A lot of people are very uniformitarian in their mindset, and they don't think anything will ever change or can ever change. And so when things start falling apart, they start getting frightened. So the balancing act that power has to pull off all the time is to convince people that things aren't changing whilst changing everything. Which is what they do, and they do it via increments, don't they? They do it, it's like the guy, if you moved your fence and took 10 yards off next door's garden, they'd whinge. But if you move your fence an inch every year, they won't notice. And so that's what's going on all the time. It's being done by increments. That Italian politician said, didn't he? Slicing the salami.
Slicing.
Yeah.
Do you think the current slide down into what sounds like might be quite a bad recession, stroke depression? Part of me, I don't want to see anybody suffer, but part of me thinks, well, to quote someone else, part of me thinks we need a bit of a reset.
It's coming. I mean, because the financial system's been on life support for 2008. So, and they've been literally printing money out of thin air now for 14, 15 years, which they've been giving to themselves and using it to buy up the land, the rivers, the lakes, the mountains. But
it's not theirs, it's ours. How do we get it back?
Well, first of all, you've got to remember that these people are very weak, and they are like physically weak. They may be mentally strong, but they are physically quite weak, and they're only as strong as the people who surround them. And so I'm reminded of the picture of Ceausescu and his wife. The day before they were deposed, they were flanked by the trusted bodyguards of some 10 years, 20 years standing, who the very next day shot them. So they're only as strong as the people who protect them. And then it's just like, I own this land, I own this river, I own this. It's like, so what, mate? You've got a piece of paper. Let's see you defend that alone. There will be a massive switch. There's going to be a massive switch. And I don't think it's going to be too pleasant to live through, shall we say.
No, I
Um,
think we're going to go through the mire a bit. I mean, I don't even think I think we're just standing on the edge of it at the moment. I think
yeah, yeah. I don't know what the tipping point's going to be
this
because
winter, maybe.
yeah, I do fear for this winter. I fear for people who have to choose between heating and eating, for example.
Yes, I know.
That worries me. I fear, especially for the elderly, that that worries me. Especially when access to a lot of essential things is now behind, internet access or whatever it may
Mm.
be. There's no accountability anymore
No
within.
country for old men.
No, no, it certainly won't be. So it does concern me. As to what we can do about it, I think that again, it's that thing about making sure you are aware of your position within the continuum of humanity and also the responsibility that places upon your shoulders to ensure that as a species we go forward in the best the most um ecumenical manner, making sure that everybody has the same access to the basics of human dignity. That has now been wrapped up in all kinds of political things and
Well, we thought we were there after World War Two, didn't we? Where they were supposed to have been building a country for heroes, and it seemed like we were.
well, yeah.
Yeah,
What's that old saying? They promised us homes fit for heroes. They give us heroes fit for homes.
yeah.
Um, they they don't do anything in it. It's quite obvious now that the people in power do not work in the interests of the people
No.
they are paid to serve. That's quite obvious. Do people care about that? No, that's just the way it is. So,
I think
so
they would if they knew that that was really the way it was.
I don't. I really
Really?
don't. No, I think they've got people into such a fear mindset that they're living from paycheck to paycheck. They're concerned with just surviving. A lot of people are just concerned with surviving, and that makes your thought process much different,
Yes, it
much
does.
different.
No, you're right, because I was that
When
time
there's
as well.
genuine jeopardy,
Yeah.
when there's genuine jeopardy, and for these bastards like Boris Johnson or whoever it may be, there seems to be no jeopardy. They
No.
seem to just get away with crimes in broad daylight. We
Well,
used to
maybe when
have,
they're giving themselves one pay rise too many, that'll be the tipping point.
well, I mean, what they're robbing the country blind, left,
Yeah.
right, and centre right now. They're literally printing their own money to buy everything, And then when the monetary system collapsed, to return to that other point, that's why everything is happening in the way it is because it's it's on life support. It can't continue. So when the monetary system as it is collapses and is inevitably replaced with a digital currency, they have to have one that they can control centrally, and then they can switch it on and off
Oh, yeah.
whenever they feel like it, and make sure that you only use it for purposes that they regard as you know of utility to them.
Well,
So
I've been saying for ages that this is going to be a digital rationing system for things
yeah,
like energy,
the
meat.
digital gulag,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
Catherine Fitz-Austin, is it?
Catherine Austin Fitz.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, the digital gulag, as she refers to it, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunately what they want. Are they going to get it? No,
Well, we'll
absolutely
find
not.
something else to trade, won't we? We'll trade. We'll
Yeah,
go back to bartering and trading. People have already started to set up situations where that can happen. We've got it happening down here. We've got a little
and
sneaky
that's the
farm.
trouble. That's the trouble for them. This spirit of
Mm,
humanity. You see, if
yeah.
you keep pushing people, they will revert to their sort of atavistic tendencies, whereby they will live in a fear vibration. But humans who are frightened become very resourceful. They don't just curl up in a ball and die. Human beings, don't forget, are the most incredible species, the most resourceful, the most resilient, um, the most intelligent, the most sentient beings, at least that we know of on this planet. And so you can't just, and that's, people, if they were so dominant and if we were so weak and they were so powerful, then it would be all over.
Yes. And they wouldn't have to go
case.
so softly either, would they?
No, they can't push too hard. It's they push one way, they push 2 steps forward, and they try to just go 1 step back all the time. And the thing now, the great thing that the people in power that is in humanity's favor now is that everything they do is more or less generated by AI. Now, there is no computer on Earth that can write an equation to predict the behavior of humans. There's just none, because there's literally more to us than we know. More to us than we think, I suppose, is more accurate, because neurologically we grow new bits in our brain when we're put under pressure and we're challenged. We literally grow. So there is more to you than you think. If you get what I'm trying to say in that statement, the more you think, the more of you there is. And so they can't push too hard. And so the idea is, by hijacking human intelligence, by attempting to force us into a position where we delegate thought to a device in our hand, knowledge retention to a device in our hand, to keep us asleep.
It's a soporific thing, isn't it? It's deliberately, you can see.
Absolutely.
I mean, people walk, the amount of people that walk across the road now that don't bother looking because they've got their heads glued to their phones. I'm just thinking, this is mad.
Back to 1984, isn't it? The people don't look up from their screens to notice there's a revolution.
Oh God!
But there will be a tipping point, and it will be a percentage of the population who come up with a better idea, and that will happen. Unfortunately, that will also, we always need leaders. Whether you want to believe what Zachariah Sitchin said about us being genetically engineered by an alien race in order to be subservient to them, and evolution was them going through various stages of development in creating the perfect servile race. We are a species that has a dominance hierarchy and needs leaders, and the kind of leader that will be offered to us is most likely just the same thing. They change the recipe, they rebrand it. So you've got to be wary of cults of personality. And yeah, it's a massive psyop. But again, it's life and there's no map, and that's the great adventure of it. And it is an adventure.
It's kind of exciting. I mean, it's like stepping off a cliff in a hang glider. It's exciting and scary.
It is exciting.
You don't quite know where you're going,
and the thing to bear in mind all the time is that it's just one level of consciousness.
Yes.
So I mean, this level of consciousness seems very real, but it's nothing more than the shadows cast by our imaginations, and it's by controlling what we feed our subconscious, and it's by controlling our behavior via ensuring that we have our hands on the gears and the levers of perception, that we can change the world. Our behavior shapes our interaction and creates our reality, and all our realities are just processes colliding with each other. And so if we want to improve the world, then we have to start with what we ourselves perceive to be reality, and that,
or make the reality with our actions and our thoughts.
That's right. And it starts with what you feed your subconscious.
Yeah. Which is why throughout all of that, when 2020, when there was all that propaganda on the radio, I was listening to talk radio at the time, which was quite good at the time, actually, before the whole Romania thing started. But as soon as the adverts came on, the fear, I turned the radio off, even though I was already on the opposite page. I just didn't want the poison in my head.
No, and that's precisely what it is. It drip feeds. They drip feed your subconscious in order to keep you in the fear vibration, and in order to ensure that you are not a part of the solution, but rather you are the manifestation of what they wish you to be. I mean, who are you?
Well, actually, saying that, all of those people like me who were turning that off, they were the ones that set up Stand in the Park. We were the ones that went to Stand in the Park. And then from all of those Stand in the Parks and those like Third Wednesdays and all of that, all of these groups have sprung up, and they're doing things. They're creating things.
Yeah.
So
Humanity will find a way. It will always find a way. You're never, ever going to extinguish the spark of humanity. Never. And it's been tried. God, I mean, when you look at the sort of, throughout just the last 100 years, the experiments people have done, and what happens, they never win. So that's the positive note to end on.
It is. That is a positive note to end on.
Yeah. You are everything that has ever existed.
Oh, Michael, it's been really interesting and great. And we've meandered over lots of different areas.
Yeah, well, that's the nature of being a human,
and a conversation.
Yeah, to articulate thoughts and give them life. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
And the ending was the Word as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, the Bible's interesting, isn't it? It's a book that starts with the world being destroyed by a flood and ends with it being destroyed by fire. So if you've never heard of Hamlet's Mill and you've never read that book, read Hamlet's Mill and look into Plato's Great Year and how that clicks into things.
Oh, you'll have to put a list out. Put a list out on
the law of precession. The
recommended texts.
Yeah.
That'd be really good. When is your next Nice Things podcast? I know you're really
this weekend, definitely.
Is it?
Definitely this weekend.
Excellent. Well, we will all look forward to that. Brilliant.
Thank you, Flora. And happy solstice.
Yeah, happy solstice. I didn't even get round to asking you what you did.
I went to work.
Oh, you didn't sit on a hill and watch the sunrise?
Sadly not. I wanted to, but I was absolutely knackered.
I bet, I totally understand where you're coming from. I've been there. Great. Thanks, Michael. And we'll look out for the Nice Things podcast at the weekend.
Thank you. All the best, Flora. Cheers.
Bye. Bye, everyone.